On September 11th, I was at morning prayer in the chapel at 8:15, and partway through the service, someone came in and spoke, whispered to one of the people who was present, and I was very irritated. I thought, whatever it is, it certainly can wait till we finished morning prayer. It was at the end of morning prayer that I realized that the person had come in to say that one of the towers had been hit. And so I, of course, immediately after morning prayer went up in time to see the second tower hit. And at that point we gathered the staff together, and you know, it was a shock, but we needed to be together, and we prayed. I immediately wrote a letter to the church, and one of the things I said was, we have now joined other parts of the world that to a lesser degree or less dramatic level experience terrorism and slaughter of innocent people for political or ideological reasons day by day. And I said, we are vulnerable, and the temptation is going to be to sort of assert ourselves because we have been humiliated, and America is the strongest and the best and the this and the that, all the superlatives. And so we can't really live with the fact that we are part of a community, a worldwide community of wounded, vulnerable people. And I said, I'm so afraid that our reaction will be one of revenge. I mean, I felt obviously it's appropriate to find the perpetrators. We didn't know at that point. But I said for us simply to live out of revenge is possibly to set in motion cycles of recurring violence that simply perpetuate themselves, when in fact, as a community vowed to reconciliation, we are called to sort of try to raise the questions. What are the deeper issues here? How do they get addressed, resolved, etc.? On the 14th of September, which in our calendar is Holy Cross Day, Phoebe and I, my wife, went down with a police escort to Ground Zero, stopping first at the Seamen's Church Institute, one of the diocesan agencies of the Diocese of New York, where various, at that point we were calling them rescue workers, were sort of allowed to rest and be fed and change their clothes and sort of have a respite space. I was asked to celebrate the Eucharist. And the Gospel, which is from the Gospel of John, the Gospel reading appointed for the day, has Jesus saying, "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself," referring to the crucifixion that lies ahead. So I celebrated the Eucharist, then got in a pickup truck with socks, dry socks. I'm not quite sure why dry socks, but anyhow, dry socks and lots of sandwiches and coffee to go to Ground Zero and distribute these things to the workers there, which we did. And then we came back around the graveyard attached to St. Paul's Chapel, and we came along the front of the chapel, and I was in the back of the pickup truck, and I banged on the cab, and I said to the driver, "Stop. The gates of the church are open. I want to see if the church is open." So we stopped, and I went in. It was unlocked. Ironically, not a pane of glass had been broken. Everything was in perfect order except for a fine gray dust that lay everywhere. And I made my way to the sacristy. The door was open. I found a piece of paper. I wrote, "Just stop by, love and prayers, Frank Griswold, presiding bishop." And then I turned to leave, and the priest, Lyndon Harris, had appeared, and we sort of fell into one another's arms, and he said, "I'm here and the church is open." As we sort of embraced, I looked over his shoulder toward this little brass crucifix above the altar, and it was facing, of course, Ground Zero. And I thought, what am I as the presiding bishop, what can I do or say that's really effective or helpful at this point? Then I saw these little brass arms, and I thought, he can contain it. I mean, he's no stranger to hatred and violence and anger and grief and all the rest of it. And I just sort of saw these little arms reaching out and, in a sense, containing all the horror and destruction and death that lay on the other side of the church wall. And so I thought, and I, when I'm lifted up, will draw all people to myself. And I thought, this is Holy Cross Day, here is the connection. To be there in that part of town on that day when everything was cordoned off by the police, it was rather like a science fiction movie, one of these sort of, you know, the earth is about to end sagas. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. Total silence and no one anywhere except at Ground Zero, where there were people looking, hopefully, for survivors. But it was just silent and this gray dust everywhere. And I realized later on that the gray dust was, yes, papers and various things, but it was also the remains of human beings who'd been incinerated in the conflagration. And I remember taking the shoes I had, which were sort of work boots, and taking them very carefully to New Hampshire, where we have a house in the summertime, and then putting them on and walking through a field and sort of thinking, this is my way of honoring the lives of those who died. And I think the other thing that I don't think we've emphasized enough is that the people who died included any number of nationalities, any number of religions, including Muslims. So it was, yes, it was an attack on the United States, but it also was an attack on humanity more broadly. There was a scheduled meeting of the House of Bishops to follow quite soon after 9/11. And some of the bishops said we should cancel it, and I said absolutely not. It's all the more reason for us to be together. And out of that meeting came a statement waging reconciliation. I know that some people felt it was too pacific and needed to be more in the kind of vein of national pride and you know, we need to avenge ourselves. Out of 9/11, particularly when I went to the House of Bishops and said, we are waging reconciliation. And I looked at Paul talking about we have been given the ministry of reconciliation. When I recounted the event of the 14th, September 14th, and the gospel reading, and I, when I'm lifted up, will draw all things, all people, you can translate it either way, to myself. I think at that point I saw the fundamental direction of my life, and indeed the church. If the church, and I don't mean just the Episcopal Church, let's just say the Christian, the universal church, however you want to think of it, is so divided and so contentious within itself, deciding who the real Christians are as opposed to the non-real Christians, who are the truly Orthodox as opposed to the unorthodox. All these sort of internal divisions, battles, judgments. How on earth can we genuinely speak to a divided world with any clarity or any authenticity? How can I talk about Christ as an agent of reconciliation if I live within a community that can't live a reconciled life? No one has all the truth. And when we think we do, we are in big trouble. The awkward truth that you embody that I find difficult, that I need actually to make space for so that my sense of truth can be broadened. And that's where reconciliation occurs, I think, when I can give space to other dimensions of a truth that's larger than I am, with reverence and respect.